So I'm going to hand over to Mike Robinson, who is the Head of Scenic Construction at the Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama, for this session on scenic construction, making a theatre flat. So away you go, Mike.
Well, hi everyone. It's great to see so many people here. So I'm going to go through building a 8x4 Mortise and Tenon theatre flat. We're going to go do this through SketchUp, which is a 3D drawing software. Just because this allows us, rather than trying to physically do it and have a camera so far away, we'll be able to close in. And as I said, mostly we're looking at the theory of it, and hopefully it will give you a good understanding about how you'd go about it. I think in terms of the actual, you're not going to be an expert on how to make one. I think you need to build one before you can start seeing yourself as an expert. But I just do absolutely welcome questions. So I'm going to start off with a question just to sort of get us going in the chat, and just to sort of just get your fingers working. So just very simply, is anyone familiar with SketchUp as a software? Yes, no. I don't know if you can do a thumbs up, thumbs down. Oh, great. Yeah, we've got one.
I can do
Used
a
it
poll if you
once.
like. I can
Oh,
do one
yeah.
right now. Should we do it?
Okay. Oh, go on. Oh, I didn't realize you was that expertise on it.
Oh, look at us go! All the technology.
Okay,
Um,
but quite a few though. I can see saying. Well, I'll tell you what. Let me share this screen, and we'll have a look at it. Great. So in theory, I am screen sharing. It's telling me I'm screen sharing. Can everyone see? Great. So here is a 8x4 flat. We can't really see much about it. I think I have to make a little bit of an assumption. I obviously there's lots of people here with lots of different experience, a lot of different backgrounds, etc. So I'm gonna have to make a uh, an assumption that you know what a theatre flat is. Okay. Um, if you don't know what theatre flat is, you can ask. We could talk about a little bit about it, but basically it's a means by which a, um, a something within in a theatre set is being carried on. So it could be the paint surface, it could be the texture, it could be a whole host of different things. But it's a means by how we create the illusion of theatre. But other than that, I'm not going to assume you know anything, and I'm going to try and go through every little bit of information that I can. So apologies for those. You might be some of you who actually, know everything I have to say. But please bear with me, go through it. And then the great thing, if you are in that lovely situation, then you get to ask the really great questions at the end. Okay, so we've got the poll. Yeah, thank you for that, Georgie. That's great. So 58%. That's quite impressive, actually. I'm imagining that a lot of that is through school. Being SketchUp was primarily a free program and schools. But that's great. Okay, cool. So great. So those of you who aren't familiar with SketchUp, don't worry about it. I'm doing all the work. You don't need to know anything about it at all. But here we have what looks like a still, but in fact it's 3D. Okay, which just means that I showed off a little bit and put the shadow in. Not that it's hard at all, but it just makes it look a little bit interesting. You can see with the render that we're actually seeing through this ply a little bit, but in fact I've got a better thing here. If I just click on there, we can. Okay, so this is really what we're looking at. This is the structure of 8x4 flat using timber, and that is what we really primarily. That's what we're going to be discussing today. So I think actually the poll was so good that's blown my mind. Can we do another poll? Because it is be really interesting. Has anybody made a flat of any sort? That'd be really useful to know. Again, don't worry about if you haven't. I mean, that's why you're here. But just Just would be interesting for me to know that. So we will. I think if you could ask questions as we go along, and hopefully Georgie will feed those to me. Oh wow, okay. Now that's quite impressive as well. In fact, they're going up. The yeses are going up, reaching 30. Okay, so almost a third of you, in fact, have made a flat before. Okay, great. And then I wonder if, in fact, yeah, it just says here, has anyone made a flat of any sort single choice? I should have done double choice, shouldn't I? Has anyone made a Tenon and Mortise flat? I should have said that. I wonder if anybody has made a Tenon and Mortise. Maybe not a poll, but just put that in the chat. Has anybody actually made one? Because it'd be interesting to know what it is that you really want to get out of this, and hopefully you will get that information. Okay, so here we go then. So we've got a flat, as I said. The flat is covered. I've taken the covering off. The covering in this particular case was ply. Obviously, it could be lots of different coverings. In this case, it was ply. I've taken it off just so we can have a look at the structure. We'll come back to the ply. The ply's gone, but it'll be back later. We will put that on. Okay. So the a little bit of terminology then, as to a flat. Theatre flat. So the uprights are called stiles. Style, you can see how style is spelt. It's not really stylish. It's slightly different. It's more like a style, as in how you'd used to get over a fence, that sort of style. And then you have the rails. You have a top rail. Often referred to as the head, but in truth, we would always call it just here, we'd call it a top rail. I don't think we would ever mention it as a head. And then the bottom rail, which technically speaking is the sill, although we don't we don't necessarily use that terminology, we don't talk about it, but we do talk about sill irons, which are something you'd add to a bigger flat. And we will actually see a sill iron later on when we look at more complicated flat at the end. Okay, so pretty straightforward. And then you've just got these three in the middle. What are they called? Well, you can guess if you look where I've pointed at the top. They're called toggle rails. Now they do have different names. I remember when I first started at Royal Welsh College, having a whole conversation. What do we call them? What do we call them here? And I think actually we agreed on toggles, but I've heard them called noggins before. I'd say, in fact, if anything, I've probably taught that they were called noggins, but noggins technically are much more to do with building stud walls. But a stud wall is very similar. A stud wall in a house is very similar to how we build a flat. Okay, so the key bit to remember about these is you've got two verticals. The verticals don't go all the way to the floor. And then you have two different sized horizontals, but they're different sizes. Now, it would be actually a lot easier if you think about it to have them all the horizontals the same size. There's a very good reason why the top and the bottom go the whole width. If you think about putting this flat up in the theatre, you're not going to lift it up and it's going to be in exactly the right place. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to slide it across the stage. If you slid it across the stage and the stile went all the way to the floor, you've got a very good chance of ripping the grain and a little bit snapping off. In fact, we quite often see that in flats that haven't been built out. You see a big corner missing. So, and that's partly why, as far as I'm concerned, they're called rails. It's a bit like a train. You're going sliding them off. It is an acceptable way to move flats on a stage by sliding them. So that's the main reason. There's another really good reason is when you are going to make a flat, you do have to make a cutting list. Now the cutting list, as you can see, for example, the height of this flat, let's just have a look, bring the dimensions in. Height of this flat, 2440, 1220, and you can see the stile isn't 2440, it's shorter. So, and again, the toggles are shorter. So you have to do a little bit of maths. You're also relying on, to do that maths, what is the size of the timber? So you obviously, you're pretty good at maths and you should check your maths, but you could be a little bit out. You could be a mil over, mil under. It's not the end of the world in theatre. It really isn't. We always say, look, don't worry about it. It's no one's ever going to come off from the audience with a tape measure your flats. But I would say that the key bit is, how wide is this flat? Well, if you cut the top and the bottom to the width of the flat, you are guaranteed that you're going to have exactly the right width flat. You could say, yeah, but wouldn't that be the same if it was the other way around for the height? But if you think about it, the height actually literally doesn't matter. No one can tell if it's the right height or not, but the width, because you'd have flats either side of it, it does matter. Okay, so why an 8x4 flat? Why is Mike talking about an 8x4 flat? Especially when he's just shown us the dimensions and they're in millimeters. Okay, so the standard size for sheet material in this country is referred to nominally. Its nominal name is an 8x4. But obviously on the sales receipt, because it's actually it has to be in metric. They have to sell things in metric. It would then tell you that it's 1220 by 2440. But we still call it an 8x4. Everyone knows what we're talking about. And as I say, it's a nominal name for it, because it's not 8x4 isn't exactly 1220. It isn't exactly 2440. It's a name. It's nominal. Another example of a nominal name would be like TV screens have a nominal name. You have a 24-inch screen. It helps you compare to other sizes. You know what a 24-inch screen looks like, but it's not giving you its size really. A 24-inch television screen is less than 24 inches wide because it's the cross measurement. So that's the key bit of that. It's nominal, and we'll come back to nominal when we talk about the timber, because the timber again is nominal. So and then just while we're on this screen, there's a little bit here where do the toggle rails get placed, and this is actually really important. So one of the things I say about what's, as a carpenter, what's the most important tool that you can have? It's your notebook. So if you have got your notebooks to hand, yeah, you want to note this one down. 6-10 centers, really important. Do it every time. Okay, and again, we'll come back and we'll see why. I wonder if anyone's got any questions that they've put in. Actually, Georgie, am I?
I think we're doing okay for the moment, but
Yep, that's okay. Yeah,
yeah. If everybody can send them to me, I can.
yeah. Feel free, because as I say, I can slow down a little bit. I have a tendency to go quite fast because I'm like can't wait to get to the next bit. If I'm honest, that's always me. So 6-10 centers, really important, and just to clarify what it means by 6-10 centers. So you start at the bottom. I know this is obvious, but it is worth clarifying. You start at the bottom, and then to the center of a stile is 6-10, and then another 6-10, so 1220, and then another 6-10, i.e. 1830. So those sort of measurements, and then we don't need one at the top because we've already got our rail at the top, which is at the very top of that is 2440. Those numbers, which are metric conversions of the classic 2 foot, 4 foot, 6 foot, 8 foot, are really important, and they're numbers that if you're working in construction, you just need to know. You just need to learn those numbers. So, and we'll find out why and how important, because it saves your life, this 6-10 business. Okay, when you come to clad it. So if I forget to mention it, please remind me. Put it in the chat. So you didn't say about the 6-10s. Okay. I will actually, because I've got a tiny little flat. I've got a little mini flat here, and we'll go through that. Okay, so that's all pretty straightforward. Talk about what timber we're using. Now in terms of timber, I was going to say in theatre, talking like a lovey. In theatre, what we do, just timber in general, no matter what you do, timber is measured by thickness, width, and length. And yes, I know, isn't everything? Well, no, not everything isn't actually. Quite often depth is used. So the terminology of thickness, when we talk about the thickness, we're talking about the smallest measurement. When we're talking about the width, we're talking about the next biggest length. Length is how long can a piece of wood be? All depends on the tree. When we buy our timber in, we have we don't know. We don't buy it by we buy it by the meter. We literally don't know what length it is until it arrives. It could be 4.2, 4.4 meters. Normally, I'd say if I had to put some money on it, it'd be 4.6, but it could be 4.8, or my favorite, 5.1. 5.1 means you can make really, really tall flats without having to do a joint. So the length doesn't concern us because we're going to cut it to length, but the sizing is actually important. Now I've drawn this. In fact, I'll tell you what, why don't we actually get the tape measure out, and we've got a width of 75. And then if we go here, we've got thickness of 25, which is a metric, if you like, 3 by 1. Now, this is where the confusion can kick in. If you ring up any builders, merchants, and say, can I have some 3 by 1? They'll say, well, if they're on the toes, and if they're used to working with theatre people, they'll automatically say, oh, do you mean PSE or PAR? Can we have anyone know what PSE, PAR stands for? It's interesting because here in Cardiff, it's PSE for sure. If you're in London, for example, I worked in London at Lambda for a while. Nobody knew what PSE meant. It was PAR. Any ideas? Anything coming in the chat?
I think
Oh,
we're all waiting to hear your
well, no,
wisdom,
well,
Mike.
yeah, oh, great. We're guaranteed you have learned something then. So PSE means planed side and edge, and PAR is sort of the same thing, but it means planed all round.
There is one person who just said that.
Oh, was it
One person who
PAR?
got it. It was PAR, yeah. Planed all
PAR.
around.
Okay,
Got one person that knows it.
and I feel that's that. I think I'm right. I've never really investigated it further. I think I'm right. That does sort of denote where you're from a little bit. So, okay, but what does that mean? All it means is that they cut the timber to 3 by 1, approximately 75 by 25, and then they plane it. Now, because they plane it, which is PSE, PAR, because they plane it, then it's a smaller size. So we use 3 by 1 PSE a lot, actually. And it's comes into us at about, it's not always the same. It's almost 20, it's always 20. It's always 20 thickness, fair play. It's always 20, but it can be 68, 69, 70, 71 mil. So you can see that's quite a bit of difference from 75, and the 20 mils is a lot of difference from 25. So I've drawn this wrong then, you're thinking. Because you've just measured it and it's 75 by 25. You haven't accounted for. We buy in for Tenon and Mortise flats is we buy in special timber that is cut to a bigger size, but when it's planed to 3 by 1. And we describe that as true 3 by 1. That's how we describe it. The suppliers like to call it engineered 3 by 1. But I think really the engineering is referring to its finish rather than its size. So sometimes we do call it engineering. In London, seeing got someone in London, there's I hope he's still going. He's an absolutely wonderful man called Maladin, who used to have pretty much, I think, the monopoly on wood for theatre, which scenic batten, in fact, they called it, which was 28 by 75. And so that's even thicker, is lovely to work with. Quite expensive, but for London, it wasn't that expensive just because he just supplied everybody. And the reason for that sort of thickness for 28, and it's a little bit with the 25 as well. It's incredibly, it makes a big difference to how straight you can make to flat. Agreed. But the main difference is fire rating. You get a better fire rating if you have it 25 mil or over. It's a better fire rating. And for some London theatres, because they all have the boroughs rather than theatres, the boroughs have slightly different fire rating. Also, 28 means you're covered and you'll get into any theatre without anyone asking for you to prove that it's fire retardant, which is the key thing. Everybody always always saying to me, in truth, about things being fireproof. There's very little in this world which is fireproof. What it needs to be is fire retardant, so that if you put a lighter to it, it doesn't light quickly or immediately. Anything that's in a fire will burn. I literally can't think of anything that won't burn in a fire. There's certainly not what you'd build a set out of. Okay, so that's a little bit about the timber. So the nice thing about it for us is we for tenon mortise flats we also get quite a nice sized tenon as well. So we particularly use tenon mortise flats when we're flying. Anything that's flown, we tend to use tenon and mortise. Because it's structurally more integral, and that's partly helped by the using a thicker timber, but the actual construction itself is much stronger. Tenon mortise, that's why we use tenon mortise flats. Tenon mortise is an incredibly strong joint. If like everything, if it's done correctly. Great. So I wonder if sorry, you might be able to help me here, Georgie, if there's a way I could do a little bit of maths. What I want to do is just do a cutting list. How are we going to make this flat and do a cutting list for it? And the cutting list is, it's a shame actually, yeah, but I haven't got my the picture of it. But it's pretty straightforward because it's 2440 mil minus the thickness of the top rail and the bottom rail. That will give you a style if you weren't doing a tenon mortise flat. That'll actually give you the style, which is because it's 75, it's nice and easy. It's double that, it's 150. Okay. But if you remember, if we did that, then we wouldn't have our tenon and our mortise, which I'll show you straight after this. We wouldn't have our tenons and mortise, so we need to add on the tenon. Now, that's not a given, but the tenon is how big we decide the tenon's going to be, or in our case, what the machine is set up to do. So in this particular case, it's 45. Again, nice easy maths, which is 245s and 90. Even I can manage that. And it's not a minus. I don't know why I'm saying that. It's a plus, because you've got to add that back on. Equals, no, it doesn't. Equals, now, I did actually do the maths earlier, so I didn't have to do this. But it's quite simple, because if you look at the 150 minus 150 plus 90 is really, if you think about it, it's just minus 60. So it's 2380, and somebody, I'm sure, will tell me if that's wrong. So we've got two styles at 238. Those are the longest ones.
Looks right to me, Mike.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, Phil.
We might both be wrong.
Yeah, and then to do the toggles is 1220, and then because we're learning the little shortcut, although I'm not learning how to use it, typing plus the 60. No, I have gone wrong. Minus the 60 equals and I was saying, no, that's nice and easy. I've sort of almost bamboozled myself.
1160.
60. I should really put millimeters. We always work in millimeters, even if it, to a certain extent, it gets a little bit silly. Like that is obviously 2.38 meters, or 238 centimeters. All of those sound a little bit less of a mouthful than 2,380, but we always use millimeters so that we can just say numbers without having to say what we're using. So millimeters is the absolute Bible. Millimeters only. And then, of course, the nice bit, is the 1, 2, 2, 0. There's no maths in maths. If we get that right, that will be the size of the flat. So there's not our cutting list, but there's the lengths. So to create the cutting list, we just go for this one is times 2. This one is actually, if you can remember, sorry, we will go back to the drawing in a minute, but it's times 3. And then the rails again times 2. And then if I can, shouldn't be too hard, we no, I can't. I'll just copy and paste it because it should be above, because you can see you always cut, which is the key bit of this, is you always cut the longest pieces of your cutting list first. I don't think it would matter with those two, they're pretty much the same, but it might save you a little bit of timber. But the thing for that is cut first, cut your 2,380, cut 1, measure it. Have you got it wrong? Is it too long? Cut it again. Is it too short? Not a disaster. You can use it for the shorter pieces. Yeah, does that make sense? So it's again really key is look at your cutting list, determine the longest ones and cut those first. And again, that'll save you embarrassment, etc. It also means that you can end up if you just do the shortest ones, you can really waste a lot of timber because the long ones don't fit onto your member. You've only got a limited. It's not a continuous piece of wood. It has got a limit. So great. So if I do I just press the cross
I've
now
copied that information into the chat. If
Oh
that's
yes,
helpful,
great.
Grant.
So we can leave that now.
Yeah.
And then and go back to our wonderful world of SketchUp. Okay, so yeah, sorry, there's your 3 toggles. There's that. Okay. So any questions on that? Does that sounds like common sense? And we do this on my course. We do this in well, we do with joints because the joints are really interesting. We have a bit of fun with that because we want to learn the machines. But we'll do this in the first 4 weeks. We do this. But we really drum home there's what looks simple isn't necessarily simple. You've got to get it right. You've got to get into the right habits. It's not just approaching it willy-nilly.
We've
Um,
got a question, Mike,
oh,
if that's
oh,
okay.
awesome. Bro.
It starts with, it might be a silly question. There is no such thing
No,
as a silly
no,
question, as
no.
I'm sure Mike. But what is the difference between Tenon and Mortise?
Oh, fantastic. Okay, well, let's have a look now. Thank you for that because that's perfect timing. I love it. I love it when it doesn't takes me in the wrong direction. It actually just moves me forward. Because what you're really asking is, can you stop going on about that and move us forward? Because we're here to hear about the tiny rods. Great. So, well, let's have a look at this flat now. Still people arriving, actually. So let's have a look at this flat. I shouldn't wander around with a tape measure in my hand. I'll just get rid of my tape measure. Exploded. So we're just going to break flat up. So remember we talked about on the cutting list. So now that's the full length. Before we cut the tenon. So that's the tenon. The tenon sticks out. Yeah. Yeah. Can you see that? So there's the and remember we added on that extra bit. And then here's the toggle with a tenon, and let's have a look at it in a bit more 3D so you can see it. You can see it's looks like a bit's been added on. It's not been added on. What we've done is we've taken off two pieces either side, and then we have this is called the shoulder here, and that means it can go into the mortise, and then it gets stopped by the shoulder. Where's the mortise? The mortise, there we can see, is a hole going in the tenon to fit. So tenon and mortise, I always say, and at this point, in fact, no, we won't look at that. But the we normally tip it up and we look at the mortise and okay, a little bit morose. Do apologise, but it does look like a grave. Uh, or with a bit of imagination, mort being word for death. That just helps, like Morticia in the Addams Family. Um, just as an easy way to remember which one is which. We always say it's funny we say tenon mortis, but for some reason I don't know why. I don't know if it was because I started winding someone up or something, but I almost have got into the habit now of saying mortis and tenon, and it really freaks some people out because it's like saying chips and fish. And some people like go, what are you talking about? Oh yeah, I see. But tenon mortis is the normal way of saying. So anyway, so we can see how this is all going to work. We've done something a little bit different at the top here. If we had a full tenon like that, all the way to the edge, then there'd be a full mortise here. Let's do a little bit of, yeah, there'll be a full mortise here. And then you could see that the joint could actually slide out. So to prevent that from happening, what we do is we actually just cut a bit off the tenon and we just make a smaller mortise. We do a blind joint. There is a different way, and we will come to that in a little bit, but let me just put it all back together. This one's called Joints X-ray. Put it all back together and you can see the joints, you can see them in place. Okay, does that help? And you can see that the lines don't quite marry up, top and bottom here. That's because when you're setting your tenons and your mortises, you should have an ever so small gap. Okay, you should use a chisel and scrape out the mortise to get it exactly how you want it to. But there's also glue as well, and it's very easy just to get a tiny little bit of piece of wood that's just thread. That mixed with glue stops the shoulders here. The shoulders totally matching, which is really important. The shoulders have to push up against it, and so it's always good to have a gap. I've put in a mil there. I've just 1 mil gap. When they used to make flats in the olden days, if you like, tenon mortise, well, certainly not with the glue that we use. We used to use like a size, and it's very thick, and it used to fill the gap. And I remember when I worked for Welsh National Opera, I remember refurbing flats from the 70s for the gap at the bottom there was totally full. The glue that we use is much better, actually. It's a much better glue. But one thing it doesn't do is it's not a gap filler, the glue that we use. But it's incredibly strong if it's incredibly thin. And we'll talk about glue. In fact, I've got some glue here. So I am actually going to glue a mortise and tenon if you've got time. I've got a mortise and tenon joint here, and I'm actually going to glue it just so you can see how we glue it. Okay, so
Just
hopefully
before we
then.
move on, Mike, am I going to ask a couple more questions? Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah. At this point, I think yeah, we're in a really good place.
Great. There's just two that have come through. One is from Jordan, who says, "Are they technically stub mortise and tenon since it doesn't go the full way through?"
Yes, brilliant. Yeah. We're going to talk a
Okay.
little bit about other tenon and mortises. It is interesting. You're 100%. It's a technically it's a stub tenon, but I think generally people wouldn't consider that a stub, even though technically you're 100% right because it doesn't go all the way through. I think generally in the industry, a stub tenon is one that's where you've cut it even shorter. But no, that is one of the interesting things about woodwork is everyone's got different names for things and different definitions, but it's by definition, yes, that is definitely a stub tenon. So well done.
And then the other question, which we briefly mentioned, it might feel it's already been answered, Kieran, by now, but the question is the purpose of the mortise and tenon joint just to create a thin profile for the flat as opposed to just a butt joint?
Uh, yes, because it does do that. Although, again, we'll look at some other flats, other ways of making flats, and we'll see the slight limitations. I would say it does make a slightly thinner flat, although you could actually put extra supports in. You could put plates, you could plate it, which I think is what you're referring to, because normally if you just do a butt joint, you've got to plate it somehow, and that makes the flat thicker. But I'd say it's a really interesting idea. Um, it does make it thinner for sure, but no, principally it's for strength. What's the advantage of a mortise and tenon? It's much stronger than any other flat. What's the disadvantage? It takes a long time. That's why it's not used so much. Um, great. Sorry, I'm just going to have to. I'm got a little bit lost as to where we are then. Oh, video time. Cool. So, how do we? And this is how we do it. How do we go about here uh, creating these joints? So we've seen. Hopefully, we see how it works. We've got the theory. How now practically, how do we go about that? So we create the cutting list, and then we we do the tenons first. Okay, and I've got a little video of that shows that. No, the video's not coming up on my to share. So, okay, we're gonna have to miss that out. Sorry.
That's okay. We can always share it a different way if you want to. That's
Yeah,
okay. Thank you.
it was just how we do how we do it. I just wanted to show you the machine, so apologies for that. But you can do it with a uh, tenon saw. Oh, yeah, sorry, just my background doesn't help me show things. But tenon saw, you've all seen a tenon saw, and um, and as we've got so little time, I do apologise. I'm just very quickly going to show you the alternative, which is a haunch tenon. I think I need to just go into. Oh, I can't get to my to make it invisible. Okay, so, but you can see here it's almost half blind. So when we instead of cutting it all the way out, you have a little bit more of a tenon, a little bit more mortise. And then if I just quickly go to the other ones, different ways of building it, which would be like I think was mentioned, like wiggle pins. I've got the wiggle pin gun here. Do wiggle pin gun. That does the wiggle pins, but it's not a strong joint, and it needs a plate on back. So that's called dog and biscuit. Yeah, and then the other way is actually like a studio flat, which is screwed in, which I'm sure anyone who has made a flat has made it this way. Obviously, this is what was mentioned earlier about, okay, this makes for a very deep flat, and storage wise isn't as good as a tenon mortise being the ideal. So just to go and literally I've got to do this in a minute. If we go back to this flat, is I just wanted to say about how you, because it's really important how you staple this. You staple it on the corner first. So get this corner straight, staple it on the corner. You do your shortest end first all the way along. Then you do your longest. Then you go halfway till you finished that section. Then halfway till you finish that section. So you're working your way to that far corner. And sorry, I have rushed that a little bit. I did want to show you something, but that's it really. And unfortunately, we haven't even got time for questions, but hopefully we did manage to do enough on the way.
Absolutely. And if you're happy for us to, Mike, we can pass on questions over email. So if anybody has any
Absolutely. I mean, if
lingering
any,
questions.
yes, if anybody, yeah, if you pass on everything, or if anybody wants my information, I'm more than happy, sharing my
Lovely.
information all the time, so it's not an issue.
Absolutely. So yeah,
Okay,
if you're happy, if any of the attendees would have any questions for Mike, then feel free to email us at TheatreCraft and we'll
great.
pass them on. But thank you so much for a brilliant session, Mike. I feel like I've learnt so much.
Great. Well, maybe we could
Um,
do another one then, as sort of like a second
Absolutely.
one next time round. We'll do it as Tenon Mortis Part 2.
Sounds perfect. Thank you so much, Mike, and thank you so much for everybody who's joined us. We can't wait to see you backstage.
Yeah, that's
Thank
great.
you.
Thanks so
Thanks.
much. Cheers.
Bye
Bye bye.
bye.